Imagine this. You've just lost your son, and his wife, a woman you've always suspected, tells you there is no will. You're about to lose everything. But what if I told you she has no idea that her former lover holds the very key to the truth that will expose all of her lies? My name is Evelyn. At 62, I've seen enough of life to know that it rarely goes as planned. You think you have it all figured out with your tidy little life, your savings, your health, and your son's good heart. You believe you've taught him well, raised him to be a man of integrity, someone who would always do the right thing. But life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you, and in my case, it did so with a brutal, dispassionate yank. It all started on a crisp October morning, just a few days after my son, Michael, passed away. The funeral was a blur of black suits, tear-stained faces, and hollow condolences that did little to fill the cavern in my chest. I was still numb, navigating my days through a thick fog of grief when I decided to do something to honor his memory. Michael was an avid volunteer at the local animal shelter. He'd spent countless weekends there, especially with the older, less adoptable dogs, the ones nobody else wanted. He had a soft spot for them, and so did I. So I packed up a car full of old blankets, towels, and the last of his untouched dog food, determined to make a donation in his name. It was a simple, kind gesture, a way to keep his memory alive through an act of love. When I arrived at the shelter, the staff greeted me with solemn, respectful nods. They all knew Michael. They knew what a good person he was. As I handed over the bags, the shelter manager, a kind woman named Sarah, said, "Michael would have loved this, Evelyn. He was just here last week, playing with Buster." Buster was a scruffy old beagle with one droopy ear and a knack for escaping his enclosure. Hearing his name brought a sweet, bitter smile to my face. I decided to spend a few moments with him to feel a small piece of Michael's presence again. The moment I stepped into the kennel, my phone rang. It was Chloe, Michael's wife. My heart sunk. Our relationship had always been complicated. She was a woman who saw the world in dollar signs, and I was just an inconvenient leftover from Michael's past. We had barely spoken since the funeral, and every conversation before that had felt strained, laced with an unspoken animosity. "Evelyn," she said, her voice a sharp, brittle thing, "we need to talk. About Michael's will." My stomach knotted. The will?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I thought you were handling all of that." "She am," she replied, her tone hardening. "But there's a problem, a big problem. I need you to come over, now." The line went dead. I stood there, holding the phone, a cold dread creeping into my bones. Why would she call me now, with that tone? I looked at Buster, who was nudging my hand, begging for a scratch behind his ears. The simple, innocent joy he radiated was a stark contrast to the dark cloud that had just descended over me. The unfairness of it all was immediate and visceral. Here I was trying to honor my deceased son's memory, and his wife, a woman who had always treated me with veiled contempt, was already circling his assets like a vulture. As I drove to Chloe's house, a sprawling modern monstrosity that Michael had paid for, my mind raced. I knew Michael had a will. He was meticulous about such things. A month before he died, he'd told me, "Mom, I have all my affairs in order. You don't have to worry about a thing. Everything's taken care of." He even mentioned leaving something for me, a small gesture to thank me for everything, for raising him right. He knew how much I worried about my retirement, and he always wanted to make sure I was comfortable. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew Chloe, and I knew her version of problem was likely a prelude to disaster. I felt the anxiety build, a familiar churning in my gut as I anticipated the next move in her game. Chloe met me at the door, her face a mask of practiced sorrow that didn't quite reach her eyes. She led me into the pristine, minimalist living room where everything was white, beige, and utterly soulless. She gestured to a small, sealed envelope on the coffee table. "This is it," she said, her voice flat. "The will." "Okay," I said, my heart pounding. "What's the problem?" "The problem is, Evelyn, that there is no will," she said, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "This is an empty envelope. The lawyer says you never got a signed copy. Michael must have forgotten to mail it." My mind reeled. That's impossible. Michael would never. He was so careful. "Well, he wasn't careful enough," she said, her voice a triumphant purr. "According to the state, without a will, everything goes to me as my sole heir." The world around me seemed to tilt on its axis. The house, the money, everything Michael had worked so hard for was now hers. And she was going to make sure I knew it. She had just found her golden ticket, a way to cut me out of my own son's life completely, even in death. The grief I had been carrying was suddenly replaced by a cold, righteous fury. She was not just robbing me of an inheritance, she was robbing Michael of his last wishes, his final act of love. I looked at her, this woman who had made my son's life and mine so difficult. The woman who saw love and family as commodities to be traded for a higher social standing. She was a product of a system of greed and selfishness, and I was just a casualty. But a new kind of resolve was building inside me. I was a mother, and I had a fierce love for my son, a love that would not be erased by an empty envelope. The irony of it all, that she was doing this to me after I had just done something so selfless in my son's memory, wasn't lost on me. Chloe and her sterile, perfect world had no concept of what it meant to truly give, to truly love. She thought she had won, but she didn't know the full story. She didn't know that my grief had just been replaced with a fire, a burning need for justice. She thought she had all the cards, but she was wrong. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed to see what happens next. You won't want to miss the shocking truth about Michael's will, the secret Chloe hid, and how her former lover is about to change everything. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The familiar streets and houses of my quiet suburban neighborhood seemed foreign, as if I had just returned from a different world, a world where grief was weaponized and family was a business transaction. I kept replaying Chloe's words in my head. "There is no will. Everything goes to me." The smug look on her face, the way she savored each word like a fine wine. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the profound disrespect for Michael's wishes, for the legacy he wanted to leave. It was a slap in the face to everything I had ever taught him about honor, duty, and keeping your word. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a long time, the engine humming softly. My small, cozy house felt like a sanctuary, but it also felt like a trap. I had worked and saved my whole life for this place, a little nest for my golden years. But now, with Michael gone and Chloe's treachery looming over me, I felt a terrible vulnerability. The savings I had were meager compared to what Michael had accumulated. What if something happened to me? What if I got sick? The thought of being at Chloe's mercy, or worse, becoming a burden to someone, was a fate I couldn't bear. My son had promised me I wouldn't have to worry, and I trusted him implicitly. How could he have made such a careless mistake? It just didn't add up. I walked inside, and the silence of the house was deafening. Every corner held a memory of Michael. The old armchair he used to sit in, the worn-out chessboard on the coffee table, the faded photograph of us at his high school graduation. The memories, once a source of comfort, now felt like a painful reminder of what had been stolen. I sat down and just stared into space, a numb exhaustion settling over me. But beneath the exhaustion, a fire began to burn, a cold, steady rage that was more potent than any hot-blooded fury. This wasn't just about me, it was about Michael. Chloe wasn't just hurting me, she was defiling his memory. And that, I decided, was unforgivable. I picked up my phone and called my best friend, Martha. "Martha," I said, my voice hoarse, "you're not going to believe what Chloe just told me." I recounted the whole story, from the moment I arrived at the shelter with the dog food to Chloe's chilling announcement about the empty envelope. Martha, a no-nonsense retired nurse, listened in silence, her quiet breathing on the other end of the line the only sound in the room. When she finished, she let out a long, slow breath. "That conniving little snake," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "I always knew there was something off about her. Michael was too good for her, Evelyn, far too good." "But what do I do?" I asked, a wave of despair washing over me. "The lawyer says there's nothing. No signed will, no proof." "Don't you dare give up," Martha said, her voice gaining strength. "A man as careful as Michael doesn't just forget to sign his will. There's something more to this, something she's not telling you. You need to fight this, Evelyn, for Michael, for his memory." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me out of the abyss of despair. She was right. I couldn't just sit back and let Chloe win, not when my son's legacy was on the line. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and research. I called Michael's lawyer, a man named Mr. Thompson, and tried to get more information. He was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Peterson. Without a signed and witnessed document, we have to proceed with the laws of intestacy. All of Mr. Peterson's assets will go to his legal spouse." He couldn't, or wouldn't, tell me anything more. It felt like I was hitting my head against a brick wall. I spent hours online, reading legal forums and articles about probate law. The more I read, the more hopeless I felt. The law was on Chloe's side. The odds were stacked against me. But I refused to give up. My stubbornness, a trait that had both served me well and caused me no end of trouble over the years, kicked in. I thought about the conversation I had with Michael just a month before he died. He was so calm, so confident. Everything's taken care of. Why would he lie to me? Why would he be so reckless? It just didn't make any sense. This whole situation reeked of a setup, a carefully orchestrated plan to defraud me. The thought made my blood run cold. Chloe was not just greedy, she was a thief, and a good one at that. I knew I couldn't take her on alone. I needed help, someone who knew her, someone who could see through her lies. And a name came to me, a name that was almost a ghost from my past. Michael had a best friend in college, a brilliant, charismatic young man named David. They had been inseparable until they had a falling out over a girl, and that girl was Chloe. The memory of it all came back in a rush. Michael and David were roommates, both studying business. Chloe had been the new girl on campus, a stunning blonde with a dazzling smile and an ambition that put both of them to shame. She had played them both, leading each of them on until they realized she was using them to get to the top. David, a man of fierce integrity, had been disgusted by her duplicity and had cut all ties with her. Michael, blinded by love, had stayed with her. It had caused a rift between the two friends that never fully healed. I had always liked David. He was smart, kind, and had a mischievous glint in his eye. He was exactly the kind of person who might know something about Chloe that I didn't. He was a long shot, a last resort, but I was running out of options. What happens when a desperate mother, scorned by her daughter-in-law, turns to a forgotten ally from the past? You won't believe the secrets that a simple phone call will reveal, and how one woman's revenge plot is about to unravel in the most spectacular way. Don't go anywhere. The story is just getting started. The following morning, I felt a new kind of purpose. The numbing fog of grief had been pierced by a sharp, clear focus. I was on a mission, and that mission was to find David. I had to know if he still lived in the area. A quick search of the old college alumni database, a relic of a time before social media took over everything, gave me a lead. He was an architect now, with a firm in Chicago. That was too far to just drop by, so I did what any respectable woman of my age would do. I sent a heartfelt and slightly dramatic email. "Dear David," I wrote, my fingers fumbling on the keyboard. "This is Evelyn Peterson, Michael's mother. I know it's been a very long time, and I'm so sorry to be reaching out under such sad circumstances. Michael passed away a few weeks ago. I'm writing to you because I believe you might be the only person who can help me. It's about Chloe." I laid it all out for him. The funeral, the visit to the animal shelter, and the chilling conversation with Chloe about the empty will. I ended the email with a desperate plea. Please, if you know anything at all about Chloe's past, about her character, or anything that might shed light on this situation, I beg you to contact me. This isn't about money. It's about my son's legacy and her blatant disrespect for his final wishes. I hit send and sat back, holding my breath. I felt a pang of doubt. What if he had moved on? What if he wanted nothing to do with the drama of his past? What if he didn't even remember me? I was a ghost from his past, after all. But I had to try. I had to do something. The alternative was to surrender, to admit defeat, and that was something I simply couldn't do. Not after seeing Chloe's smug, triumphant face. That woman was a piece of work. She acted like she was the sole proprietor of grief, as if my own pain was an inconvenience. My internal monologue was getting quite a workout these days, filled with biting commentary about her every move. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A new email notification. My heart leapt into my throat. It was from David. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry to hear about Michael. He was a good man, and I always had a feeling something like this would happen with Chloe. Give me a call. We need to talk." His message was short, but it was enough. It was a beacon of hope in a sea of despair. I dialed the number he provided, my hands shaking. David's voice was just as I remembered it, deep, calm, and reassuring. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry for your loss. Michael was my best friend. I'm heartbroken." His genuine sorrow was a balm to my raw grief. We talked for an hour, sharing stories about Michael, laughing at old memories, and mourning the person we both loved. When the conversation turned to Chloe, his voice hardened. He said, "I always knew she was trouble. She was the kind of person who could see the value of a house or a car, but couldn't see the value of a friendship or a human heart. When Michael told me he was marrying her, I tried to warn him, but he was blinded by her. She had a way of getting what she wanted." I told him everything, and he listened patiently. "She says there's no will," I said, my voice cracking. "But Michael told me he'd taken care of everything." "That's because he did," David said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "Evelyn, what I'm about to tell you, you can't tell anyone, especially not Chloe." My heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the moment of truth. He and Chloe were more than just friends in college. They were lovers. And during our time together, she told me about her family. Her father was a brilliant lawyer, but a very difficult man. He had a private practice, and he was a master of hiding assets and creating secret trusts. He taught Chloe everything he knew. "She's a good liar, Evelyn. A very good one. She knows how to manipulate people and use the legal system to her advantage." He then went on to tell me about a specific strategy his father had taught her. He called it a ghost will. It was a will that was drafted and kept secret, with no signed copy, but with one crucial, tiny detail that would make it legally binding in certain circumstances. This was a classic Chloe move, he said, a way to keep all the power in her hands. But what is the detail? I asked, my voice barely audible. I don't know, David said. She never told me. It was her little secret. But she did tell me one thing. She would never let a single cent of her money go to anyone but herself, not even to Michael in a worst-case scenario. That's why he was so worried. That's why he was so careful to make sure everything was in a trust that I helped him set up. A trust? My mind raced. What trust? I asked, my voice a mixture of confusion and hope. He never told you? David sounded genuinely surprised. Michael set up a blind trust a few years ago. He told me he wanted to make sure you were taken care of, no matter what. He told me he had some big plans. He put a lot of money into it, and all of his assets, including the house. He said he was going to surprise you with it one day, maybe for your 65th birthday. My eyes welled up with tears. My son, my sweet, thoughtful Michael, had been planning for my future all along. And Chloe had not only hidden this from me, but she had tried to pretend it didn't exist. The rage from before was now a boiling inferno. She wasn't just a thief. She was a monster. Now you know the truth about Michael's trust, but you still don't know the most important thing: how to access it. Will Evelyn find the secret key, or will Chloe's web of lies trap her forever? The revelation about the trust left me reeling. Michael had been working behind the scenes for years, quietly building a safety net for me. The love and devotion behind that act were so profound, they took my breath away. And the sheer audacity of Chloe to not only hide this, but to lie about the will, to watch me grieve and pretend that she was the one who had been wronged. It was a level of villainy I didn't think a person was capable of. The serene, minimalist living room in her house suddenly seemed less like a monument to modern design and more like a cage, a place where she had trapped my son's memory and my future. The irony of her calling me over to reveal the empty envelope was not lost on me. It was a power play, a move designed to demoralize me and make me feel helpless. But thanks to David, her carefully constructed house of cards was starting to wobble. But if the trust exists, why isn't the lawyer telling me? I asked David, my mind racing through the possibilities. He's probably bound by a confidentiality agreement, David explained. The trust is blind, meaning its contents and even its existence are kept from those who aren't the primary beneficiaries or trustees. Michael probably set it up that way to keep Chloe from meddling with it. It's a very common legal strategy to protect assets from a spouse in case of a divorce or a death. He was a smart man, Evelyn. So what do I do? I asked, a mix of hope and desperation in my voice. How do I prove it exists? How do I get to it? That's the million-dollar question, David said. Michael was a tech guy, a bit of a computer whiz. He probably left some kind of digital breadcrumb trail, a note, an encrypted file, something. We need to find it. He paused. I can help. I'm coming to town next week for a business meeting. I'll stay an extra day and we can go through Michael's things. We'll find it, Evelyn. I promise you. The offer of help from David, a man I hadn't spoken to in 2 decades, was more than I could have hoped for. It was a lifeline. It was a testament to the kind of person Michael was, a person who inspired loyalty and love even after he was gone. I felt a surge of gratitude and a renewed sense of strength. I wasn't alone in this. I had an ally, a friend, someone who understood the kind of person Chloe was and was willing to fight against her. In the days leading up to David's arrival, I felt a nervous energy. I started cleaning out Michael's old room, a task that I had been dreading. I went through his old books, his college notes, his computer files. I was searching for a needle in a haystack, a tiny piece of information that would unlock the door to his final wishes. Every time I touched one of his belongings, a wave of memories would wash over me. I found an old journal from his teenage years, filled with his hopes and dreams. He wanted to be a hero, he wrote, a man who changed the world for the better. He had achieved that, in a way. He had changed my world for the better, and now, even in death, he was still fighting for me. The thought was both heartbreaking and inspiring. I also couldn't resist a bit of my own reconnaissance. I drove past Chloe's house, a habit I had developed since the funeral. I saw her car in the driveway, and a few times I saw her through the window. She was always on the phone, a small, triumphant smile on her face. I imagined her in that soulless house, surrounded by my son's things, thinking she had won. I pictured her in that minimalist living room, the empty envelope on the coffee table, a cruel symbol of her victory. Oh, she was savoring it. And I was going to make sure that savoring turned into a bitter taste in her mouth. My sarcasm was my only defense against the crushing weight of her injustice. When David finally arrived, he was just as I remembered him, tall, with a kind face and a calm, determined energy. We hugged for a long time, two old friends reunited by a shared loss and a common enemy. "Let's get to work," he said, his eyes filled with a steely resolve. We started with Michael's computer. It was a mess, a jumble of files, projects, and documents. David, with his tech-savvy background, started a deep scan. He wouldn't have just left it in a random folder, David said, more to himself than to me. It's got to be hidden, encrypted, somewhere only he would think to look. The search was tedious, a long and frustrating process. We went through every file, every folder, every obscure document. We found his old college papers, his vacation photos, his work presentations. We even found a folder labeled Mom's Retirement Plan, filled with research on financial advisors and investment strategies. It was a poignant reminder of his love for me, a love that Chloe was so cruelly trying to erase. Suddenly, a light went off in David's eyes. He exclaimed, "The flash drive!" He always kept a spare one in his wallet. He said it was for just-in-case situations. He pulled out his own wallet, a beat-up leather thing, and showed me the tiny silver drive he kept tucked inside. Michael was meticulous about things like this. He would never have left the house without one. The only problem was we had already gone through Michael's wallet when we were sorting his personal effects. It wasn't there. My heart sunk. Was this another dead end? My optimism, so recently rekindled, began to flicker and fade. The house suddenly felt oppressive again. Where could it be? I mumbled, feeling a wave of despair wash over me. The search for the flash drive had come to a dead end, or so it seemed. I felt the familiar weight of defeat settling in my stomach. David, however, was undeterred. He was a professional problem solver, and a lost flash drive was just another puzzle to him. He was pacing Michael's room, a frown of deep concentration on his face. "Think like Michael," he mumbled to himself. "Where would you put a just-in-case flash drive that you wouldn't keep in your wallet?" He stopped, abruptly, his eyes widening. "The car!" he exclaimed. He always kept a spare key, a spare everything, in the glove compartment of his car. It's a classic Michael move. My heart leaped. The car, the one thing I hadn't thought to look at. Chloe had taken possession of it, along with everything else. "But Chloe has it," I said, my voice filled with frustration. "I can't just go and search her car." "You don't have to," David said, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "I have a friend who owns a garage. He's worked on Michael's cars for years. He might have a spare key, or at least he can help us get a look at the car. Chloe would never suspect a thing. She thinks we're just a couple of grieving relatives." The plan was audacious, bordering illegal, but I didn't care. At this point, I was willing to do whatever it took to find what my son had left for me. The next day, we drove to David's friend's garage, a greasy, cluttered place filled with the smell of oil and old tires. The owner, a man named Frank with a kind, weathered face, greeted us with a somber look. "I'm so sorry about Michael. He was a great kid." David explained the situation, and Frank, a loyal friend to Michael, didn't hesitate. "I've got a key to that car," he said, pulling a spare key from a drawer. "Chloe brought it in last week for an oil change. She was in a hurry, didn't even want to wait. Said she wanted to sell it as soon as she could." The callousness of her actions, her desire to erase every last trace of my son as quickly as possible, was like a physical blow, but it also fueled my determination. Frank led us to a back lot where Michael's car was parked, a sleek black sedan that was a testament to his success. I reached for the glove compartment, my heart pounding in my chest. What if it wasn't there? What if this was another dead end? My hand trembled as I opened the small door. Tucked away in a small pouch alongside the registration and insurance documents was a tiny silver flash drive. I pulled it out, my fingers shaking. "We found it," I whispered, holding it up like a trophy. "All right, let's get out of here," David said, a hint of urgency in his voice. "We'll go back to your place and see what's on it. We've got a short window before Chloe notices something's wrong." Back at my house, we eagerly plugged the flash drive into my computer. A folder titled "Just in Case" popped up. We both leaned in, our eyes glued to the screen. Inside the folder was a single document, a PDF file titled "Final Wishes." I clicked on it, and the document opened. It was a formal will, meticulously written, detailing Michael's assets and their distribution. But what took my breath away was the final paragraph. It wasn't a will at all. It was an irrevocable trust. It stated that all of his assets, the house, the cars, his bank accounts, everything were to be transferred to a blind trust with me as the sole beneficiary and David as the trustee. Chloe wasn't even mentioned. The document was signed and dated with the signature of a notary public. "He did it," I whispered, tears of relief and gratitude streaming down my face. He always was one step ahead. He knew her. He knew what she was capable of. This was his way of protecting you from her. He scrolled down, and a separate file opened, an audio file. He said, "What's this?" clicking on it. A moment later, Michael's voice filled the room. "Mom, if you're listening to this, it means something went wrong. I told you I had everything taken care of, and I did. I knew Chloe would try to pull something. I knew she'd try to convince you there was no will, but I wanted you to hear this from me. The trust is real. The documents are a fake. The real documents are sealed away in a special place with instructions on how to access them. I've sent you a separate email with instructions to a safe box. I'm sorry to put you through this, but I wanted to make sure she never got her hands on my money. I wanted to make sure you were taken care of. I love you, Mom." The message ended, and the room was silent, except for the sound of my sobs. Now we had the truth, but we still didn't have the assets. Will Evelyn find the email with the safe box information, or will Chloe discover their plan and destroy the evidence? After listening to Michael's message, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, a fresh wave of grief for my son, a profound sense of gratitude for his love and foresight, and a cold, hard resolve to see his wishes through. He had anticipated every one of Chloe's moves, a testament to his character and her predictable nature. She had underestimated him, and she had underestimated me. A mother's love is a force of nature, and my love for Michael had just been weaponized. We immediately went to my computer to check my email. The message was there, sent a month before Michael's death. The subject line was, "Your birthday surprise," a clever decoy to ensure Chloe wouldn't open it if she ever got access to my accounts. I opened the email, and inside were the instructions, a code and an address for a private vault company downtown. Michael had a penchant for spy novels and elaborate plans. This was his version of a Mission Impossible, and I was his lead agent. "I need to go now," I said to David, my voice urgent, "before she finds out." "Evelyn, we have to be careful," David cautioned. "This is a big step. Once we go to that vault, it's out in the open. Chloe will know we're on to her." "I don't care," I said, my jaw set. "She has had her moment of triumph. Now it's my turn. I'm not going to let her steal from my son. Not anymore." We drove downtown, the silence in the car filled with a mixture of nervous anticipation and a strange kind of thrill. The vault company was in a discreet office building, a stark contrast to the opulence of Chloe's home. We were met by a stern-looking man in a suit who checked our IDs and the code Michael had given me. He led us to a private room where a small, unassuming safe was waiting for us. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking as I entered the code. The safe clicked open, and inside I found a sealed envelope. My name was written on it in Michael's familiar handwriting. I opened it with reverence. Inside were the notarized original documents for the Blind Trust, signed and sealed. The document stated that upon Michael's death, all of his assets were to be immediately and irrevocably transferred to the trust, with me as the sole beneficiary. It also included a detailed list of every asset he owned, from the house to his bank accounts to the rare comic book collection he had been building since he was a teenager. The final page was a personal letter to me, a last testament to his love. "Mom, I know this is a lot, but I couldn't trust Chloe. She only sees money, not people. I want you to have this so you can live the life you deserve. I love you more than words can say. You'll always be my hero." I folded the letter, a wave of bittersweet emotions washing over me. Michael, my son, my hero, had planned all of this for me. He had outsmarted Chloe, using her own greed and predictability against her. He had won, and I was going to make sure she knew it. We took the documents to Mr. Thompson, the lawyer who had been so dismissive of me before. This time he was a different man. His eyes widened as he read through the documents, a look of genuine shock on his face. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, his voice hushed, These are originals, signed and notarized. This trust is legally binding. This means that Chloe has no claim to any of Michael's assets, not the house, not the cars, not a single penny." The look on his face, a mixture of awe and disbelief, was almost as good as the look I knew would be on Chloe's face. He then informed us that the transfer of assets would be immediate and that Chloe would be notified in the coming days. The legal system, for once, was working in my favor. Later that evening, David and I celebrated with a quiet dinner at my house. We were tired, but a triumphant energy filled the air. "He was a good man, Evelyn," David said, raising his glass. "He was. A very, very good man." "Yes, he was," I said, a smile finally reaching my eyes for the first time in weeks. "And he's still protecting me, even from beyond the grave. I had found justice for my son, and a peace I thought I would never have again. My triumph was complete. The final chapter is just around the corner, and you won't want to miss the shocking confrontation when Evelyn and David go to Chloe's house to take back what's rightfully hers. What will happen when Chloe discovers her plan has backfired? Will she fight, or will she crumble? The climax is here, and it's going to be glorious." With the notarized documents in hand, David and I felt a surge of confidence. The legal backing was solid, and the truth was on our side. The smug satisfaction that had been Chloe's constant companion was about to evaporate. My sorrow for Michael was still raw, but it was now laced with a burning desire for justice. I decided we wouldn't wait for a formal legal notification. This was personal, and I wanted to deliver the news myself. It was the least my son's memory deserved. We drove to Chloe's house, the same mansion where she had so callously tried to deceive me. The sleek black car of Michael's was still in the driveway, a silent testament to her greed. I stepped out, my posture straight, my chin held high. I was no longer a grieving mother to be manipulated, but a woman with purpose, a woman with a secret. Chloe answered the door, her face a picture of serene composure that I now knew was a carefully constructed facade. "Evelyn," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I wasn't expecting you. I thought the lawyer had already delivered the message." She was referring to the notice about the intestacy laws, the very lie we were about to expose. He has, I said, and her face tightened almost imperceptibly. David stood behind me, a silent, unreadable presence. Chloe's eyes flickered between us. "What is he doing here?" she demanded, a hint of suspicion entering her voice. She had never liked David, seeing him as a threat to her control over Michael. Now, with him by my side, her carefully maintained veneer of calmness was cracking. "David is here because he knows everything," I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. "He knows about the trust." The color drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" she hissed, stepping back. "There is no trust." "Oh, but there is," I said, pulling a copy of the notarized trust document from my purse. Michael was a meticulous man. He didn't just forget to sign his will. He put everything into a blind trust, with me as the sole beneficiary and David as the trustee. You've been living in a house that isn't yours, driving a car you don't own, and spending money that was never yours to begin with. I watched her, waiting for the full weight of the words to hit her. She looked from me to David, her mind racing, trying to find a lie to counter the truth. But there was nothing. The empty envelope was a fake, a cruel trick, and she had been found out. "This is ridiculous," she finally shrieked, her mask of composure falling away completely. "You have no proof. That document is a forgery. I'll call my lawyer and the police." Her voice was shrill, desperate. "Go ahead," David said calmly, stepping forward. "We've already been to Mr. Thompson. The transfer of assets has been initiated. Everything, the house, the cars, all of it, is legally mine to manage for Evelyn now. You're trespassing, Chloe." His words were a final, crushing blow. The house of cards she had built so carefully was collapsing, and she was watching it all fall. The anger in her eyes was now pure, unadulterated fury. She had lost, and she was going to be a sore loser. What happened next was something I never expected. Chloe's perfect facade shattered, revealing a woman cornered, desperate, and dangerous. You will not believe the desperate act she committed to try and save herself and how it brought her entire world crashing down. Chloe stood in the doorway, her face a contorted mask of rage and disbelief. The woman who had glided through life on a cloud of entitlement was now face to face with a reality she couldn't manipulate. Her eyes, filled with a feral kind of fury, darted between me and David. "You think you've won?" she spat, her voice a low growl. "You think you can just show up here with some fake documents and take everything from me? I've been with Michael for 10 years. I am his widow. The law is on my side." "The law is on the side of justice, Chloe," I said, a wave of calm satisfaction washing over me. "And justice has a way of finding its own path." In a final, desperate act, she lunged at me, her hands outstretched, her perfect manicure aimed at my face. But David was faster. He stepped between us, his arm a barrier. "Don't," he said, his voice as cold as ice. The look in his eyes stopped her dead in her tracks. She knew he wasn't bluffing. She had tried to cheat me out of a future my son had so carefully planned, and she had failed. Now she was a woman without a home, a woman without a single dollar of the money she thought she had already won. Her desperation turned to a manic panic. "You can't do this!" she screamed, retreating into the house. "You can't just take everything!" She grabbed a heavy vase from a pedestal in the hallway, an expensive, hand-painted piece I knew Michael had bought for her. She raised it high, her eyes wild. "I'll smash it all! I'll destroy everything before you can have it." David and I stood there, watching her unravel. She was a caricature of a villain in a bad movie, but the fear in her eyes was real. She had banked everything on Michael's death, and now her plan was a smoking ruin. Her rage was a mirror of her own emptiness. She had no real love, no real friends, just a cold, calculating desire for money and power. And now she had nothing. She started to smash things, a whirlwind of destruction tearing through the pristine living room. A glass coffee table shattered. A painting was ripped from the wall. The chaos was a physical manifestation of her own internal breakdown. Then through the wreckage, she ran to a small, hidden safe behind a painting. She frantically entered the code, pulled out a stack of papers, and held them up. "You think you've won?" she yelled, her voice hoarse. "This is a copy of Michael's will, the one he never signed. He had plans to leave me everything. He was just about to sign it. I'm not a fraud. I'm the victim here." But as she waved the papers, a single sheet fluttered from her grasp. It was a note, folded in half. David's eyes narrowed. He said, "That's Michael's handwriting," he said, his voice filled with a new kind of suspicion. "What is that?" "Nothing!" she shrieked, trying to snatch it back, but a sudden gust of wind from the open door sent it fluttering to the floor. I picked it up, and my breath hitched. It was not a will, but a letter from Chloe to her secret lover. It was dated a week before Michael's death. In it, she was bragging about how she had manipulated Michael and how she couldn't wait for him to die so she could be rich and finally be with her real love. This wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal. The letter from Chloe to her secret lover was a final, damning piece of evidence. It detailed her cynical plan to get Michael to change his will just before his death, her cruel jokes about how easily he was manipulated, and her impatience for him to finally pass away so she could start her new life with her lover and her newfound wealth. It was a cold, calculated masterpiece of betrayal. The letter fluttered in my hands, a simple piece of paper that held the power to destroy everything she had worked for. My mind, which had been a whirlwind of emotion, became razor-sharp and focused. This was no longer about a will or a trust. It was about exposing a sociopath, a woman who had no soul and no conscience. "I think we need to read this to her out loud," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. David, who had been watching me, simply nodded. We were a team, united by a common goal. I began to read the letter, my voice low and even, the words a hammer blow to Chloe's perfect world. "Darling, I can't wait for all this to be over. Michael is getting weaker by the day. Soon we'll be together, rich and free. His mother is a naive old fool. She thinks he has a will, but I made sure he never signed the final one. She'll have nothing." With each word, Chloe's face changed from defiance to a horrified realization. She was a woman who had always been in control, and now she was watching her darkest secrets be laid bare. "Stop!" she shrieked, clamping her hands over her ears. "That's not real. It's a fake. You made it up." Her perfect manicured facade was gone, replaced by the raw, ugly truth of her desperation. She lunged at me again, but David was ready this time. He grabbed her wrists, holding her still. "It's over, Chloe," he said, his voice laced with a cold disgust. "It was over the moment you thought you could use Michael's death to build a new life with another man." The final nail in her coffin was a tiny detail in the letter. She had signed it with a small, unique flourish that I recognized immediately. It was the same flourish she used to sign the birthday cards she gave to Michael every year. A personal, unique identifier that she thought would remain her secret. But I, his mother, had seen it hundreds of times. "This is your handwriting, Chloe," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "This is your little secret, and now the world will know who you really are." The look on her face was one of pure, unadulterated terror. She had been caught, not by a lawyer or the police, but by the one person she had so easily dismissed as an old fool. In the end, she didn't fight. She crumbled, a heap of designer clothes and shattered dreams on the floor.
She had lost her house, her car, her money, and now her reputation. The police arrived shortly after, called by a frantic neighbor who had heard her screaming. We handed them the letter and the will. Chloe, the woman who had always been so poised, was led away in handcuffs, a broken woman who had traded her soul for a life of luxury. I looked at her one last time, a pathetic figure, and felt a wave of pity mixed with a deep, abiding satisfaction. She had chosen her path, and she had gotten exactly what she deserved. Justice in this case was not blind. It was personal. It was a mother's love, a friend's loyalty, and a son's final act of defiance.
The aftermath was a strange mix of triumph and emptiness. Chloe was gone, her carefully constructed life in ruins. The legal process was swift and decisive. The blind trust was validated, and all of Michael's assets were legally mine. The house, the cars, the money, it was all transferred to my name. It was a victory, but it was a victory born of loss. My son was gone, and no amount of money or justice could bring him back. David stayed with me for a few days, helping me sort through everything. We went through Michael's things, not with the frantic desperation of a search, but with the quiet reverence of two people honoring a memory. We decided to keep the house for now, a place where Michael's memory could live on, and a reminder of his love. We also decided to use a portion of the money to create a foundation in Michael's name, a foundation that would help local animal shelters, just as he had always wanted. It was a way to turn his tragedy into something good, a way to make sure his legacy was not forgotten. One evening, we were sitting in the living room, a quiet, peaceful space now that Chloe's negative energy was gone. I was looking through a box of Michael's old personal effects when I came across an old leather-bound journal. It was filled with his neat, careful handwriting, a chronicle of his life. I turned a page and saw an entry from a few weeks before his death. "I know I'm running out of time," he had written. "The doctors have been clear, but I'm not afraid. I have lived a good life. The only thing that bothers me is Chloe. She's been acting strange lately, talking about a surprise and making veiled references to my finances. I don't trust her. I've put everything into a blind trust for Mom, but I'm afraid she'll still try to find a way to get it. If something happens to me, I hope Mom and David find this. I've also left a message for Chloe, a little something to remind her that I'll always be one step ahead." I turned the page, and there was a final entry, written in a different, shakier handwriting. "Chloe, if you're reading this, know that I'm not the fool you think I am. The will you're holding is worthless. The trust is real, and I've already set in motion something that will ensure you never forget what you've done. Goodbye, Chloe. You'll never get what you wanted." Tucked inside the back of the journal, I found a small, locked metal box. I handed it to David. "Open it," I said, a sense of dread and curiosity bubbling inside me. He pried it open, and inside we found an envelope filled with pictures. They were of Chloe and her lover, taken in secret, with dates and times meticulously documented. The pictures were not just of them together, but of them signing legal documents and of them laughing at Michael's expense. Michael had hired a private investigator to follow her. He had known all along. The final betrayal was a small detail in one of the pictures. Chloe's lover, the one she had been planning to run away with, was not a rich man, but a con artist. He had been using her just as she had been using Michael. In the picture, she was signing a contract that she thought was a prenuptial agreement, but in reality, it was a legal document that transferred all of her personal assets into his name.
The final turn of the screw was that she had been swindled by the very person she had betrayed Michael for. She had lost everything, not to me, but to the man she had loved. She had traded her soul for nothing. It was the most perfect, ironic, and brutal form of poetic justice I had ever seen. The story of Michael's death was a tragedy, but the story of Chloe's downfall was a dark comedy. And I, his mother, had the final, satisfying laugh.